It was still early when Kikalomo stepped into the roadside stall, her tray balanced on her head like it was a part of her. Her feet, dusty from the walk from home, moved with a rhythm she'd long mastered. She'd been selling oranges since she was 10, right beside her mother. Now 22, she could peel an orange with her eyes closed, cut it into 4 with a rusty knife, and sell it with a smile that hid years of tiredness. Life had taught her to endure, not expect. The street in Ibadan was alive as always, filled with loud voices, keek horns, radio sounds from open shops. Kike's stall wasn't really a stall, just a wooden bench under a faded umbrella, shared with Mama Ronk who sold groundnuts. The older woman always tried to get Kike to laugh, but this morning even she noticed something was off. "You day all right?" Mama Ronk asked, wiping sweat from her brow. Kikalomo only nodded, her fingers working through a pile of oranges. She'd barely slept. A strange man in a black suit had come to their compound the day before, asking for her. Said he was a lawyer. Everybody had gathered, thinking she was in trouble. But what he said next confused her more than anything she'd heard in her life. He said someone in America had died. A relative she never knew. And she was the next of kin. The man handed her a folder. She hadn't opened it. "Go through it well," he said, before leaving. "This is serious, Miss Kikalomo. Your life is about to change." But nothing changed. Not yet. She'd gone to bed with an empty stomach like every other night. She couldn't tell her mother. Mama Kike had passed 4 years ago after a long illness. It was just her now. Her and her younger brother, Deo, who was always in trouble with the police for following bad friends. He'd been missing for 2 days now. That folder was still sitting inside the black nylon she tucked into her pillowcase. She hadn't touched it. What did America have to do with her? She didn't even know where that was on the map. All she knew was oranges, customers, debt collectors, and how to dodge them. Still, the way that man looked at her, it wasn't like the others. His voice was calm, and his English was clean, not like the sweet-talking Lagos scammers she heard about. The tray on her head was getting lighter now. Customers came and went. Some joked. Some didn't have change. One young man with a Bluetooth speaker danced as he bought 3 oranges and winked at her. She barely smiled. She thought about Deo again. Maybe he had gone to his friend's place in Bodija. Maybe he'd come back tonight. Or maybe... "Kike," a voice said behind her. She turned slowly. It was Checker, the young barber from 3 shops down. His hair was always clean-cut, and he walked like he owned the road. He was carrying the folder. Her folder. "You forgot this on your bench yesterday," he said, holding it out. "I didn't open it. But, are you okay?" Kikalomo took it quickly and nodded. "Thanks." "You sure?" She nodded again. He didn't push. Just gave a small wave and left. She watched him go, wondering how he always looked like life wasn't choking him. Maybe because he had a generator. Maybe because he didn't have a brother like Deo. That night, the rain started without warning. Loud and heavy. It slammed against the zinc roof of their room, drowning every other sound. She lit a candle and sat on the cold floor. Deo still wasn't back. She pulled the folder closer. Her fingers hovered over the edge. Then slowly, she opened it. There were pictures. Documents. A letter. Her name typed in bold letters on a page she couldn't fully understand. Something about a will. Something about inheritance. She stared at the papers, not sure if it was real. The picture was of a man. Dark skin. Big smile. He wore a cap that said Aloha. Her heart knocked against her chest. She'd never seen him before. She picked up the letter. It was handwritten. "To my niece, Kikalomo. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I always knew about you. I followed your life from a distance. I couldn't come back, and I'm sorry for that. But everything I have now belongs to you. It's your time." She dropped the paper. The candle flickered. A tear rolled down her cheek. She hadn't cried in months. The room felt smaller. Someone knocked. Hard. She jumped. Kike. It was the landlord. She wiped her face and stood. Yes. You haven't paid your rent in 2 months. If I don't see money by tomorrow, you and that your useless brother are leaving. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. When he left, she sat back down. She looked at the letter again. Something deep inside her stirred. Not joy. Not yet. But something. She picked the folder, held it close to her chest. Outside, the rain poured harder. And for the first time in her life, Kikalomo didn't feel poor. By morning, the sky was still grey, and puddles filled the potholes outside the compound gate. Kikalomo sat at the edge of her wooden bed, staring at her torn slippers. The folder lay beside her on a faded Ankara wrapper. She hadn't slept. Not a wink. Everything she'd read kept circling in her head. A man she didn't know had left her everything he owned. In America. It didn't make sense. Her stomach rumbled, but there was nothing to eat. Her last 40 naira had gone into buying oranges yesterday. She rubbed her palm against her thigh, thinking. The letter said someone would come for her. Someone would help her through the process. But when? And how? The knock came again. This time, softer. She walked to the door and opened it slightly. Chika stood there. His black t-shirt was damp with sweat, and he carried a small nylon bag. I brought a kara, he said. She blinked. I saw you yesterday. You looked off. And this morning I just thought, maybe you haven't eaten. Kikalomo didn't know what to say. Her pride almost made her shut the door, but her stomach betrayed her and made the decision. She opened the door wider. Come in small, she said. He entered, handed her the bag, and stood near the door, glancing around her small room. It wasn't much. One mattress on the floor, a plastic chair, a metal bucket, and the wooden table where the folder now Saturday. She grabbed a piece of akara, bit into it, and closed her eyes for a second. The warmth calmed her. You want to tell me what's going on? Chika asked. Gently. She didn't respond immediately. Then, slowly, she told him everything. Not everything, but enough. About the lawyer. The letter. The will. The man in the photo. Honolulu. She didn't even know how to pronounce it properly. Cheka didn't laugh. He just listened. When she finished, he rubbed his chin. So wait, someone in America just left you all his property? She nodded. And you never met him before? Another nod. He exhaled. Voila. That kind of money can change your life. Oh. Kike looked down. Or scatter it. They sat in silence. The only sound was water dripping from a leak in the ceiling into a rusty cup. You think it's real? She asked him. He shrugged. I don't know. But that lawyer looked serious. Then Chaka did something unexpected. He picked the folder and flipped through it carefully, his eyes scanning the typed English. Wait, see this, he pointed at a page. There's a name. One woman. Cynthia Okoye. Said to be your uncle's lawyer in America. Kikalomo sat upright. But the man who came here said he was the lawyer. Yes, but from here. This Cynthia, she's the one over there. Chika kept flipping. And here, this is her number. They both stared at the digits. Kikalomo had never called an international number before. How do I even call her? She asked. Chika grinned. Let's go to Mama Beese's shop. She sells airtime and knows how to call abroad. I've seen her do it. Kikalomo hesitated, then stood up. She folded the documents carefully into a black nylon, wore her slippers, and followed Chika out. The compound kids were already playing with a worn-out tire. An old man with a towel around his waist stood by the well, brushing his teeth noisily. Life was moving on like nothing had changed. But everything had. Mama Beese's shop smelled of soap and smoke. She looked up from where she was frying puff-puff and raised a brow. Chika. Wetting bring Una. He pointed to Kikalomo. She wants to call someone in America. Mama Bisi laughed, loud and long. America coo. You sure say your real head you carry come this morning. Kikalomo stood firm. I just want to try. Something about her tone made Mama Bisi pause. She wiped her hands on a cloth, collected the paper, squinted at it, and clicked her tongue. Okay. Wait small. She pulled out an old phone from her drawer, pushed in a long scratch card, dialed something, and then held it to her ear. After a few seconds, she handed it to Kike. It's ringing. Kikalomo's hands shook. She pressed the phone to her ear. It rang. Once. Twice. Then. A woman's voice. Calm. Sharp. Hello. Kikalomo's mouth was dry. Hello. Please, is this Cynthia Okoye? Yes. Who is this? My name is Kikalomo. From Nigeria. I got a letter from Uncle James. He said you're his lawyer. There was a silence. Then the woman spoke again, softer this time. Oh my God. Kikalomo. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Kike's knees almost gave out. Chika grabbed her arm to steady her. You've been trying. Yes. We lost track of your contact. Thank God. I'm so glad you called. Listen, there's a lot we need to talk about. Your uncle left everything to you. But there's a process. I'll guide you. First, we need a passport, a visa. Do you have a bank account? Kikalomo was speechless. No. No bank. No passport. That's fine, Cynthia said. We'll fix it. I'll be sending someone to work with the local lawyer. You're not alone in this. The line crackled. Please, Kikalomo. Be careful. Not everyone will be happy for you. The call ended. Kikalomo stood there, phone still to her ear, face pale. Chika held her by the shoulder. What did she say? She looked at him. Her lips trembled. She said, they've been looking for me. Chika smiled. So it's real. She nodded, slowly. It's real. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then a man walked up to them, wearing a brown shirt and shiny shoes. His eyes moved quickly from Kikalomo to Chaka. You are Miss Kikalomo. She frowned. Yes. I'm sent by the lawyer you spoke to. We need to begin your documentation. There's a lot to prepare. He handed her a white envelope. Inside was a check. Her name was written on it. In real ink. The amount was not small. Her knees nearly gave out again. But this time, she didn't fall. She gripped the envelope, stepped back, and looked up at the sky, which had started clearing. Something new was beginning. And she wasn't ready. But it didn't matter. Because life had already changed. The letter sat on her table for 2 days. The envelope with the check stayed untouched inside her pillowcase, along with the growing sense that her whole life was now a shaky table with one leg shorter than the rest. Kikalomo had been quiet since the phone call. She didn't go to the stall. She didn't peel a single orange. The smell of citrus, once so familiar, suddenly made her sick. Every time she looked at that white envelope, it reminded her that something far too big was unfolding, and she was at the center of it. On the third morning, a black car parked outside their compound. No one in the compound owned a car. Definitely not one with leather seats and tinted windows. Children left their rubber sandals and ran after it, cheering like it was Santa Claus arriving in June. Women peeked out of their windows, adjusting their wrappers. One of them even started applying powder to her face. The door opened and a tall woman stepped out. Her skin was light, smooth. She wore plain jeans, a simple shirt, and still looked like someone from a different world. She scanned the compound, then fixed her gaze on Kikalomo's window. A knock followed a moment later. Kike opened the door slowly. The woman gave her a soft smile. Good morning. I'm Ijeoma. Cynthia sent me. Kikalomo didn't know what to say. so she simply stepped aside and let the woman in. Ijeoma sat with elegance, not crossing her legs like rich women in movies, just calm. Present. Like she'd done this 1,000 times before. "You're overwhelmed," Ijeoma said, not as a question, but a fact. Kike nodded. Ijeoma pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "Your uncle left instructions. Clear ones. The money is real. The properties are real. But more importantly, the responsibility is also real." Kike frowned. "Responsibility?" "Yes. He didn't just leave you wealth. He left you people. There's a foundation in your name already. There are staff to manage. Reports to file. He didn't want the money to just sit. He wanted it to grow and help others. He saw something in you." Kikalomo stared at her cracked floor tiles. She'd never even imagined owning a plot of land, talk less of running anything. "But I sell oranges. I don't know anything about foundations or staff." "You'll learn." Ijeoma opened the folder. It had pictures, buildings, logos, reports. Then she brought out a small phone and handed it over. "This has a US number. Cynthia and I will reach you through it. From today, we start processing your passport. After that, your travel documents. You'll go to Abuja for the interview. We'll be with you every step." Kike held the phone like it was made of glass. Then something hit her. "My brother. Deo. I haven't seen him for 5 days. I don't even know where he is." Ijeoma tilted her head slightly. "Can I be honest with you?" Kike looked up. "There will be people who come into your life now, pretending to care. People who want something. People who will say they knew you before, even if they never looked at you twice. You need to separate your heart from your head. Even with family." Kikalomo stared hard. "He's not pretending. He's my brother." "I'm not saying he isn't. I'm saying, be wise." Ijeoma stood. "I'll come back in 2 days. Think carefully about everything. We're not in a hurry." She paused at the door. "Also, you need to open a bank account. Immediately." And with that, she left. Kike sat for a long time after that. Then, she reached under the pillow, pulled out the check, and stared at the amount again. Her hands trembled. She didn't know how to deposit a check. The only banking experience she had was when her mother once tried to open a savings account but never finished the process. So she went to someone she trusted. Chika. He was trimming a customer's beard when she arrived. His eyes widened when he saw her. The customer looked at Kike like she was someone important now. Word had spread. Cheka wrapped things up quickly and followed her outside. "I need help," she said. "Always." She handed him the check. His eyes widened. "Ah. It's not even the full thing," she added, quietly. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Chaka said, "There's a Zenith Bank down the road. Come. I'll take you." They walked together, her palms sweating. The woman at the bank was kind, but formal. She didn't smile much, but she didn't insult her either. She guided Kike through every form. Helped her set a PIN. She handed her an ATM card that looked too shiny to be real. Just like that, Kikalomo had her first bank account. And her first deposit. When they came out of the bank, Chika looked at her. "You know everything is about to change, right?" She nodded. He hesitated. "I just don't want to lose you to all this." Kike looked at him, confused. "Lose me how?" He shrugged, scratching his head. "People with money, they change. They disappear. Or they pretend they don't remember who helped them when they had nothing." She stared at him. Then did something she hadn't done in a while. She smiled. "I won't forget." But somewhere deep inside her, she wasn't sure if she was telling the truth. Or just saying it to make the moment easier. By the time she got home, 2 women were waiting outside her door. One was from her church, the other was someone she barely spoke to. "Kike, the older one said, smiling too widely. We just came to check on you. Oh. We heard the good news. God has finally remembered you. Kikalomo smiled politely, unsure what to say. The other woman held out a small note. This is from my daughter. She wants to start hairdressing, and we thought maybe you can. I haven't collected anything yet, Kikalomo said quickly, stepping past them. They nodded, still smiling, but their eyes weren't smiling anymore. Inside, she closed her door and sank to the floor. She finally had what many people begged for. But now, the world had changed. Not just her. Everyone around her, too. And deep down, she knew, this was just the beginning. The morning light crept slowly through the cracked window panes, casting long shadows across the faded floor of Kikalomo's small room. She sat on the edge of her bed, the phone heavy in her hand, her heart heavier still. The world outside was waking up, calls from hawkers, children shouting, the distant roar of traffic, but inside, everything felt strangely silent. Like the moment had frozen in time. She thought about her brother, Deo. 5 days gone without a word. Each passing hour was a knot tightening around her chest. She had to find him. But where? Her phone buzzed. A message from Cynthia. Are you ready to begin the paperwork? We need your birth certificate and your national ID. Kikalomo didn't have either. Her mother had kept those things, but after her passing, most of the documents were lost or forgotten. There was no telling where to even begin. Cheka appeared at her door, holding 2 cups of hot tea. You need to eat something, he said softly, stepping inside. His eyes caught the folder still on the table, the open letter beside it. Anything new? She shook her head. I don't even have the papers they asked for. He sat down beside her. I know someone who can help. My uncle works at the local government office. He's not the best with people, but he knows the system. Maybe he can get you what you need. For the first time in days, Kikalomo smiled, a small, hopeful curve. Later that afternoon, they walked through narrow, sunlit streets lined with peeling walls and dusty stalls. The government office was a worn building, humming with the noise of people waiting and clerks typing. Cheka led her to a side door, where a gruff man greeted them. You Cheka's niece? The man asked. Yes, sir. I need help with some documents, Kikalomo said, voice steady. The man grunted and motioned for them to sit. I'll see what I can do, he said, but his eyes weren't kind. Hours later, after waiting and navigating through a maze of paperwork and impatient officials, they left the office with photocopies of Kikalomo's birth certificate and a temporary national ID. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Back at her room, she stared at the documents, holding them as if they were fragile treasures. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Cynthia. We'll schedule the visa interview next week. Be ready. The pressure was mounting. The chance to travel to America, to claim what was hers, was so close she could almost taste it. Yet, a shadow loomed over her excitement. Deo was still missing. That evening, she sat outside under the dim light of a street lamp, scanning the faces of passers-by. She asked after him at every corner, at every small shop. No one had seen him. A man, tall and heavy-set, approached her. You're Kikalomo, right? She nodded cautiously. I heard you're the one who got that big inheritance. She stiffened. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. People like you, they don't last here. Too much noise, too many eyes. Kikalomo clenched her fists. Where's Deo? She demanded. The man shrugged. Can't help you with that. He turned and melted into the crowd. Her heart pounded. Fear whispered cold words in her ear. That night, restless and afraid, she sat in the darkness. The money, the property, the trip to America, all felt like distant things while her brother disappeared somewhere close. The next morning, Ijeoma returned. She was carrying a leather-bound notebook, full of names, addresses, and schedules. We need to start organizing your life here, Ijeoma said, calm but firm. You'll be traveling soon. But before that, we have to secure your foundation. Kikalomo nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. We'll need you to meet with a few people, accountants, managers, lawyers. They will explain the details, but don't be afraid to ask questions. The meetings started the following day in a rented office downtown. The air smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Kikalomo felt out of place. The others wore suits and spoke in terms she barely understood. One woman, Ngozi, took special interest in her. Warm and patient, she explained the financial reports, the investments, and the goals of the foundation. It's about more than money, Ngozi said softly. It's about people. Helping those who need a chance. Kikalomo thought about the children in her neighborhood, the women selling small goods, the families struggling just to eat. Maybe this was her chance to do more. But even as hope bloomed, the ache for Deo stayed sharp. She confided in Ngozi during a quiet moment. My brother is missing. I don't know where he is. Ngozi's eyes softened. I can help. I know people who can look for him. But you must be careful. This new life will bring both friends and enemies. Days turned into a whirlwind. Documents to sign, phone calls to make, appointments to keep. Yet Kikalomo kept one foot in her old life, checking on neighbors, visiting Mama Ronk's stall, asking quietly about Deo. One afternoon, as she walked back from the office, a small crowd had gathered near the market. Someone was shouting. She pushed through. And there, lying on the ground, bruised and beaten, was Deo. Her heart stopped. She rushed to his side, tears blurring her vision. Deo! What happened? Where have you been? He looked up, eyes glazed. I got into trouble, Kike. I was trying to help. But it went wrong. She held him tight. Come home. We'll figure this out. As they walked back together, the weight on Kikalomo's shoulders felt heavier than ever. The fortune, the foundation, the trip to America, all of it seemed distant compared to the struggle of saving her brother. But she was learning. That life wasn't just about money. It was about holding on to the people who mattered. And somehow, against all odds, she was going to make it work. The night wrapped the neighborhood in its quiet darkness, but inside Kikalomo's small room, the air buzzed with unease. Deo sat on the edge of the worn mattress, his shirt torn and stained, his eyes heavy with stories he wasn't ready to tell. Kikalomo moved to fetch water from the bucket, her hands trembling as she poured it into a basin. How did this happen? She asked softly. Deo looked away, staring at the cracked wall. I got involved with some people. Thought I could help. Things got bad. I ran. She dropped the cup into the basin with a splash. Why didn't you call me? He sighed, voice rough. I was scared. I thought, maybe this money would change everything and I'd be left behind. Kikalomo's heart ached. The money felt like a curse some days, opening doors but also tearing her apart from the people she loved. She moved closer and sat beside him. You're not alone, Deo. We're in this together. Outside, the neighborhood slept unaware of the storm inside that little room. The following days were a blur of exhaustion. Kikalomo divided her time between learning about the foundation and caring for her brother. Deo grew quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes, she caught him staring out the window as if searching for a way out, or maybe an escape from the guilt. Ijeoma came often now, guiding Kike through contracts and meetings. One afternoon, she handed Kikalomo a thick folder. This is the annual report for the foundation. It's important you understand where the money is going. Kike flipped through the pages, seeing pictures of schools, clinics, clean water projects. Each one looked like a distant dream from her corner of the world. I want to visit them, she said firmly. I want to see with my own eyes. Ijeoma nodded, approving. We'll arrange it. But the more she stepped into this new world, the more Kikalomo noticed a shift in those around her. The smiles were fewer. The greetings colder. Gossip traveled faster than she could keep up with. One afternoon, As she walked through the market, a woman she barely knew whispered behind a hand. "She's not like us anymore. She thinks money will buy her respect." Kikalomo kept her head down but felt the sting. Chaka, ever loyal, caught up to her. "Ignore them. People fear what they don't understand." She wanted to believe him, but the loneliness crept in like a shadow she couldn't shake. At the office, Ngozi pulled her aside. "There's a meeting tomorrow. Important people will be there, investors, partners. You need to be ready." Kike swallowed hard. "I don't know if I belong there." Ngozi smiled gently. "You belong because this is your uncle's legacy now. You just have to find your voice." That night, Kikalomo practiced speaking in front of the cracked mirror. Words felt foreign, clumsy, but she kept going. The next day, she walked into the sleek conference room, heart pounding. Men and women in sharp suits sat around a polished table. She noticed their polite smiles, the subtle glances. The meeting began. Figures, charts, proposals, all unfamiliar but important. Kikalomo listened, asked questions, stumbled over words, but kept going. By the end, a few nodded at her, including one man who introduced himself as Emeka. "Your vision is clear," he said quietly. "I believe this foundation can make a difference with you leading it." She wanted to believe him. After the meeting, as she stepped outside, her phone buzzed. A message from Cynthia. "Visa interview scheduled for next Tuesday. Be prepared." The countdown had begun. But back home, Deo's condition worsened. He stopped eating. His nights were restless. Kikalomo felt helpless, torn between two worlds. One evening, as rain poured outside, Deo finally opened up. "I'm scared, Kike," he whispered. "What if this money changes you? What if I lose my sister?" Tears streamed down her face. "I'm scared too. But I promise, I won't forget where I come from." They held each other, the storm outside matching the one inside their hearts. Days passed. Preparations intensified. Ijeoma arranged for a suit to be tailored, a small bag packed with essentials. On the day of her visa interview, Kikalomo woke before dawn. She dressed carefully, the fabric heavy and strange against her skin. Chaka arrived with a gentle smile. "You'll do great." At the embassy, the waiting room was cold and intimidating. Faces blurred together. When her turn came, she faced the officer, answering questions about her background, her uncle, and her plans. After what felt like an eternity, the officer nodded. "Your visa is approved." Relief flooded through her, but so did a new wave of anxiety. The journey ahead was real. Her old life was slipping away, but the new one was still unknown. As she walked out into the afternoon sun, Kikalomo looked back at the city she'd always known. She held on to the hope that she could carry both worlds inside her, without losing herself. Because this story was far from over. The weeks between the visa approval and the day of her departure felt like a slow, heavy river dragging Kikalomo through currents she wasn't ready for. The air in her small room seemed thicker, filled with the weight of what was coming and what she might leave behind. Her neighbors stopped by more often now, some with smiles that barely hid curiosity, others with eyes sharp enough to slice through her nerves. It was clear that everyone was watching, waiting to see what she would do with this unexpected fortune. Deo stayed mostly quiet, curled up on the old couch, staring into nothing. He was improving slowly, but the shadow of fear and guilt lingered deep in his eyes. Kikalomo tried to keep him close, talking softly about the future, about what the foundation could mean, but sometimes the silence between them said more than words ever could. Ijeoma became a constant presence, arriving early, leaving late, her efficient calm like an anchor in the storm. She introduced Kikalomo to more people, lawyers, bankers, marketing experts, and social workers who were all part of the network managing the inheritance and the foundation. Their meetings were a blur of contracts and decisions that often made Kikalomo feel like a child trying to read a language she didn't know. One afternoon, Ngozi took her aside and said, "You need to understand, Kike. Money brings power, but it also brings expectations. You'll be pulled in many directions, and some of those people won't want what's best for you. Kikalomo nodded, the warning settling in her chest like a cold stone. She was beginning to see the cracks beneath the shiny surface. At home, things were changing too. Her mother's old neighbors started showing up, some offering help, others asking for favors. One day, a man came claiming to be a distant cousin, his smile wide but eyes calculating. Kikalomo's heart raced, unsure if she could trust him. Deo watched from a distance, his jaw tight. "I'm worried about you," Deo said one evening as they sat outside under the dim streetlight. "People are coming out of nowhere, and some want to take more than just your money." She reached out, squeezing his hand. "I won't let them. We'll get through this." But the fear was real. The night before her flight to America, Kikalomo stood at the small gate of their compound, looking up at the sky dotted with stars she barely noticed before. The air was cooler than usual, and a soft breeze carried the smell of earth and distant fires. Cheka arrived quietly, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I made this for you," he said, handing it over. Inside was a simple necklace, a small charm shaped like an orange, carved from wood. "For when things get tough," he said. "To remind you where you come from." Kikalomo's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Cheka." He smiled. "You'll do great. Just don't forget us." She nodded, clutching the necklace tightly. Inside, Deo sat on the floor, a small bag packed beside him. "I'm staying," he said firmly. "This is your journey. I have to fix my own." She wanted to argue, to beg him to come, but she knew he had made up his mind. The next morning, at the airport, the crowd pressed close. Kikalomo's heart pounded as she clutched her passport, the pages full of stamps and hope. Ijeoma stood beside her, offering calm words and steady hands. As she walked towards the departure gate, she looked back once, catching sight of Deo's face in the crowd. Silent, steady, a brother left behind but never forgotten. The plane lifted off, cutting through the clouds and carrying Kikalomo toward a future that glittered with promise and danger. The journey was long and tiring, but as she stared out the window at the endless sky, she felt a fierce determination rise inside her. This was her moment. Not just to claim her inheritance, but to claim herself. To build something more than money. To make a difference. To find her place in a world that had suddenly grown so vast. And deep down, she knew the hardest parts were still ahead. But she was ready. The plane touched down just as the sun began to dip low, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that felt both strange and beautiful to Kikalomo. Honolulu was a world away from the dusty streets and cramped markets she'd always known. Palm trees lined the airport entrance, swaying gently in a breeze she could feel even inside the terminal. The air smelled different, cleaner, sharp, and sweet all at once. Kikalomo clutched her small suitcase tightly as she stepped out, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Ahead of her stretched the unknown, a place where she was suddenly someone important, someone with power, but also someone invisible in the crowd of strangers. At the airport, she was met by a tall man in a neat suit. He smiled warmly and held a small placard with her name on it. "Welcome, Miss Adebayo," he said, his voice smooth but careful. "I'm Michael, here to assist you during your stay." Kikalomo nodded, feeling a flicker of relief. Having someone to guide her made the giant city feel just a little less intimidating. Michael helped her navigate the maze of the airport, her eyes wide at every new sight, the gleaming floors, the moving walkways, the fast-talking people rushing by. Outside, the sun dipped lower, and the city lights began to twinkle like stars on the ground. As they drove toward the estate, the city seemed alive in a way she hadn't expected. Towering buildings glittered against the dusk, and the streets were dotted with flashing signs and bustling cafes. Michael pointed out landmarks, explaining a bit about the city's history and culture. Kikalomo tried to absorb everything, but her mind wandered back to Deo and the life she'd left behind. The estate was breathtaking. A sprawling mansion set back behind tall gates, surrounded by gardens bursting with flowers and greenery. It looked like something out of a dream, something she wasn't sure she deserved. Inside, a woman named Lydia greeted her. Lydia was in charge of the household staff and the day-to-day management of the property. She was warm but businesslike, showing Kikalomo around with practiced ease. "This is your home now," Lydia said as they walked through rooms filled with art and expensive furniture. "You'll have everything you need." Kikalomo nodded, feeling both overwhelmed and a strange sense of belonging. She touched the smooth surface of a polished wooden table, the coldness grounding her. That evening, she sat alone on a balcony overlooking the city lights, the quiet hum of the metropolis below a sharp contrast to the noise of her old neighborhood. The necklace Chika gave her hung around her neck, a small piece of home she could hold on to. Michael came by with a folder of papers, the estate's finances, the foundation's plans, and a list of contacts she'd need to meet. "You'll have a lot of decisions to make," he said. "But you don't have to do it alone." Kikalomo smiled faintly. "I know. I'm just still figuring out how to be here." The next morning, she met with Thomas, the foundation's financial advisor. A man in his late 40s, Thomas was patient but direct, explaining investments, budgets, and goals with a steady hand. "The money your uncle left is substantial," Thomas said. "But it needs to be managed carefully. We want to grow it and use it to help as many people as possible." Kikalomo listened, asking questions, trying to keep up. She wanted to be involved, to understand every detail, but the world of finance felt like a maze. Later that day, she visited the foundation's office, a modern building in the city center. Inside, she met more members of the team, project managers, community organizers, and volunteers. They spoke passionately about their work, schools being built, scholarships given, health clinics supported. One woman, Amora, took Kikalomo aside. "Your uncle believed in giving back," Amora said. "He started this foundation with the hope that it would make a real difference." Kikalomo nodded, feeling the weight of that hope settle on her shoulders. But even as she stepped deeper into this new life, shadows crept in. She noticed subtle looks from some staff, doubt, suspicion. A few whispered behind closed doors. Someone had questioned whether she was ready to lead. One evening, while going through documents in her room, Kikalomo received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, low and urgent, whispered, "Be careful, Kikalomo. Not everyone here wants you to succeed." Her heart raced, and the line went dead. She sat back, the necklace warm against her skin, a reminder of where she came from and the battle ahead. Days passed in a whirlwind of meetings, learning, and adjusting. She made friends, people like Amora and Michael who offered guidance and support. But she also faced challenges, a disagreement over funding decision, a tense board meeting where her ideas were questioned, and moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she wasn't strong enough. One afternoon, she received a package from home. Inside was a letter from Deo, written in his shaky handwriting. He spoke of missing her, of wanting to be better, and of hope for the future. Tears blurred Kikalomo's vision as she folded the letter carefully. She called Cheka that night, their voices a lifeline across the miles. "I miss home," she admitted. Cheka's voice was steady. "You're doing something amazing, Kike. And we're proud of you." As she lay down that night, the city's lights glowing softly outside her window, Kikalomo understood this was only the beginning. The fortune her uncle left was more than money. It was a test, a challenge, and a chance. She would have to fight for her place, hold on to her roots, and find the strength to carry the weight. Because this new life, with all its promises and dangers, was hers to shape. And she was ready to rise. The mornings in Honolulu began with a calm that sometimes fooled Kikalomo. The sun would rise gently over the water, casting soft light across the city, and for a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But beneath that calm, Kikalomo felt a storm growing inside her, a whirlwind of doubts, hopes, fears, and new responsibilities that pressed heavy against her chest. She had been in America for weeks now, but the distance from home felt deeper every day. Each phone call with Deo brought comfort and worry in equal measure. He was trying to find his footing, but the darkness he'd fallen into before she left still shadowed his words. One morning, after a restless night, Kikalomo sat by the large window of the mansion, watching as the city slowly woke up. Her hands rested on the small wooden orange charm that hung around her neck. It was a small piece of the life she had left behind, and it grounded her when everything else felt like it was slipping away. Ijeoma had been pushing her hard lately. More meetings, more decisions. The Foundation's board was divided about her leadership. Some doubted her experience, others questioned if she could handle the pressure. Kikalomo had started to realize that inheriting money was only the beginning. Managing it was an entirely different challenge. She had begun visiting projects funded by the Foundation, traveling to nearby communities where schools and clinics had been built. The smiles of children, the gratitude of families. It was these moments that reminded her why she was here. But even then, she couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that she was out of place. One afternoon, after a long day visiting a school, Kikalomo sat with Amora in a quiet cafe. The sun was dipping low, and the hum of the city buzzed softly around them. "You have a lot of people counting on you," Amora said gently, stirring her tea. "But don't forget to take care of yourself too." Kikalomo sighed. "Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world. And I'm still so far from who I want to be." Amora smiled. "That's normal. Every leader feels it at some point. But you're stronger than you think." Back at the mansion, the nights grew colder and lonelier. Kikalomo found herself wandering the halls, the silence pressing in. She missed the noise of her old neighborhood, the voices calling out in the market, the smell of roasted corn and fresh oranges. One evening, a knock came at the door. It was Michael, the man who had greeted her at the airport. "I thought you might want some company," he said softly, holding 2 cups of tea. They sat together in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. Michael shared stories of his own struggles, how he'd worked his way up from nothing. It was a reminder that behind every polished suit, there was a human story. But even with the small moments of connection, Kikalomo felt the weight of expectation growing heavier. The Foundation needed a new strategic plan, the board demanded transparency, and whispers of jealousy and mistrust swirled in the background. One morning, an urgent email arrived. A major donor was threatening to withdraw funding unless the Foundation's leadership showed stronger results. Kikalomo's heart sank. It was the first real test, and she wasn't sure she was ready. She called Ijeoma, her voice trembling. "What do I do?" Ijeoma's response was firm. "You show them you're not just your uncle's niece. You are the future." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Kikalomo worked late into the night, reviewing reports, preparing presentations, and reaching out to community leaders. She visited projects herself, asking questions, listening carefully. Slowly, she began to find her footing. At a board meeting, she stood before a room full of skeptical faces. Her voice was steady as she laid out a new plan, one focused on sustainable growth, community involvement, and transparency. The room was silent at first. Then, one by one, members nodded. The meeting ended with cautious optimism. Afterward, Amora came up to her. "You're proving yourself. Keep going." But the victory felt fragile. That night, as Kikalomo lay in bed, she received a message from Deo. It was short, but the meaning was deep. "I'm better. Thank you for believing." Tears filled her eyes. The journey was hard, and the road ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, she felt hope. Her life was no longer just about money or inheritance. It was about family, responsibility, and finding strength she never knew she had. And no matter what came next, Kikalomo was ready to face it, one step at a time. The days stretched on, each one folding into the next like the turning pages of a book that Kikalomo couldn't put down, even when exhaustion weighed her down like a heavy cloak. She had come so far, Yet the weight of her new life pressed in deeper with every decision, every phone call, every quiet moment alone in the vast halls of the mansion. Her mornings began early, often before the sun broke over the ocean, with emails and calls from across the globe. Lawyers in New York, trustees in London, community leaders here in Honolulu, and activists halfway around the world who wanted the Foundation's help. The responsibility was enormous, and sometimes, when she closed her eyes, the faces of those who depended on her flickered through her mind like a silent reminder of why she had to keep moving forward. But amid the endless meetings and strategies, Kikalomo was learning something even more profound. Wealth was not simply about the money. It was about choices, who to trust, who to forgive, and how to hold on to herself when the world tried to pull her apart. One afternoon, she stood on the balcony, the warm breeze teasing her hair, and looked out over the glittering city below. It was easy to feel lost here, surrounded by beauty and luxury that seemed so far removed from the small market stalls of Lagos where she'd grown up. Yet, she carried those streets in her heart, the laughter, the smells, the struggles and the love, and they gave her strength she hadn't known she had. The Foundation's work was blossoming. New schools were opening, clinics were being staffed, and scholarships were changing the futures of children who, just months before, seemed invisible. Kikalomo traveled often now, visiting the communities, listening to stories that filled her with both joy and determination. She saw the faces of children who reminded her of herself, and in their smiles, she found the fuel to fight harder. But not everything was smooth. The closer she came to success, the more opposition she faced. At board meetings, old rivalries surfaced. Some questioned her every move, whispering doubts in corners. One night, she found a letter slipped under her door, a warning to step back, to leave the Foundation to those who knew how to handle it. The message was clear: not everyone wanted her to win. She shared the letter with Michael, who frowned deeply. "You're making waves, Kike. Some people don't like change." She nodded. The necklace chica gave her resting heavy against her chest. "Then I'll have to keep swimming." Her connection to home remained a lifeline. Deo's calls grew more frequent, his voice stronger each time. One evening, she spoke to him late into the night, their words weaving across the miles, bridging the gap between their two worlds. "I'm proud of you," Deo said softly. "You're doing more than I ever dreamed." Kikalomo smiled through tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her bond with Chaka deepened as well. He was her anchor, a reminder of the life she left behind and the people who believed in her. When she felt overwhelmed, she would call him, and his laughter would fill the silence, bringing light back into her darkest moments. One morning, as the sky blushed with dawn, Kikalomo received news that the Foundation had secured a major grant, enough to expand their reach beyond what they'd imagined. The victory was sweet, but it came with new challenges. More projects to oversee, more voices to listen to, and more decisions that could change countless lives. At a celebration dinner with the Foundation's team, Kikalomo stood before the gathered crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This journey began with a gift I never expected," she said, "but it is the people, the communities, the children, the families, who have given me purpose. Together, we're building something lasting. This isn't just my story. It's ours." Applause rippled through the room, and for the first time, Kikalomo allowed herself to feel truly proud. But deep inside, she knew the path ahead would never be easy. The fortune was not just a blessing, it was a test. A call to be brave, to be wise, and to hold on to the heart she carried from the market stalls of Lagos to the shining streets of Honolulu. As she stood beneath the stars that night, the ocean whispering secrets nearby, Kikalomo felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. She had become more than an orange seller's daughter. She had become a woman who could carry the weight of a fortune and the hope of many in her hands. And that was only the beginning. Thank you so much for being with us on this incredible journey with Kikalomo. If her story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments the country you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Your stories and voices make this experience even richer. Until next time, take care and stay inspired.